So here we are, the last video of the year. And so let's really get down to the meat of the matter. Point blank, what's my message? In a nutshell, detach, wake up, and go with the flow. Cultivate non-dual awareness. Stop struggling. Stop resisting. And transcend the illusory reality. Easier said than done, right? I've always said that if people are looking for a user's guide to life, a perennial philosophy to assist in navigating existence, then Buddhism will never let you down. There is no other philosophy that comes closer to being a blueprint for our purpose here. But what about Hinduism? Although Hinduism does contain deep wisdom and some of the same core principles as Buddhism, which is understandable due to it being the veritable father of Buddhism, unfortunately, Hinduism is convoluted with far too much mythology, dogma, sexism, classism, and theism, and gurus that seek to lure spiritually needy people to become dependent on them. This is the primary reason the Buddha founded his philosophy, and that is what Buddhism is, a philosophy of experiential exploration. Unfortunately, so many people will never even give it a consideration due to the advent of religion, which falsely identifies itself as, quote, spiritual, which thereby smudges spiritual philosophies with associations they have nothing to do with. The main one, of course, being that spiritual philosophies are religious. And so now, this toxic, contagious association has led to Buddhism becoming a religion, something it was never meant to be and goes against everything the Buddha was about. So to clarify, spirituality is not a vague, ambiguous concept. Quite simply, spirituality is the philosophy and practices that are in relation to awareness. It's got nothing to do with heavens, hells, ghosts, spirits, souls, angels, devils, or gods, or anything else that is beyond the grasp of the experience of the ever-present now of awareness. Of course, religion had no choice but to contrive this association to spiritual philosophy because it needed a way to legitimize itself. And it worked twofold, legitimizing itself while stripping away the legitimacy of spiritual philosophy. It worked to the point to where now Buddhism is largely defunct. This is why in my videos I have worked hard to point out these factors, and have tried to redefine the Buddhist philosophy with alternate connotations and nomenclature. This is the main intention behind renaming this perennial philosophy as the science of awareness. And the main tenet of the science of awareness, as was with Buddhism, is to explore, question, observe, and find out for yourself. Don't believe anything anyone tells you. Verify it yourself through the experiences of your awareness. The fundamental vehicle that makes all things possible and links back to the source of all things. Of course, this is lost on most people because another thing religion has succeeded in doing, maybe indirectly, is discounting the significance of awareness into something that can be overlooked and taken for granted. Can you imagine that? Overlooking that which is facilitating the looking? And of course, conventional science has done its fair share in contributing to this also, relegating awareness as an inconsequential byproduct of matter. Both of them, without really realizing it, work together in tandem to keep you locked in illusion. They want to keep you focused on superficial appearances and dogmatic conceptions. Anything to keep you from becoming self-reliant and enlightened. They do not want you to trust yourself, your experiences, or your intuition, but rather become tangled up in a quagmire of thoughts, beliefs, and appearances. They want you to distrust the very thing that serves as the platform for all thoughts, beliefs, and appearances. The awareness that without there would be no thoughts, beliefs, or appearances. And so, what is the underlying purpose to sustain illusion and maintain delusion? To uphold slavery to desire, of course, that which cannot be entertained without delusion and illusion. This is why sustaining the illusion is so important. For if an awareness ever goes lucid, illuminating and enlightening itself, it will recognize the empty, unsubstantial quality of the contrived reality and will discard desire, detach from its false associations, and move towards transcending the paradigm. Upon death, the surrender of everything is not optional. It will be forcibly ripped from you. But none of this will matter if one has not removed desire. If desire remains, the only place death will lead is into more life. Now a lot of you scoff at this because it implies reincarnation, a big temporary taboo, right? But it's really not even that big of a deal. In fact, reincarnation is completely scientifically verified. Nothing is ever created nor destroyed, just recycled. And the fact that life forms have increased in number doesn't mean a thing either. For no one ever said that there was a specified amount of souls that stay at a set configuration. And when you die, there is no continuity of the self-identity you have formed an attachment to. Awareness comes from a vast, unlimited sea. When a cup scoops up a portion of the water, this is equatable to an individual. But when the individual dies, it's like the water being thrown back right into the sea. The only thing that increases or decreases is the number of cups. And this is determined by the amount of procreation. And what fuels procreation is desire. And so then comes the big question. Why discard desire and transcend the paradigm? What's wrong with indulging desire, forming attachments, lingering in illusion, and playing the game? Unnecessary suffering. And how exactly is the suffering fostered? Desire leads to attachments, all of which are empty, unsubstantial, passing, and transient. And as a rule, if attachments are formed, we must suffer their loss, which is completely unavoidable and, ironically, leads to craving for more. It's a vicious cycle. The continuous cycling wheel of life and death. And yet it is completely unnecessary. You're going to have to surrender everything anyway upon death. So why not do yourself a favor and prepare for this moment by working towards discarding desire? And how does one discard desire? Detachment. Breaking free from your programming by unconditioning, unidentifying, and disassociating your awareness from its anchored, clinging foothold in a self-created fantasy. What's the point of forming attachments over and over, only to have them ripped from you over and over, and then subsequently suffering over and over? Feeding addiction simply for the sake of addiction. So I say unto you, purge your desire, go with the flow, form no attachments, and try to help others do the same until your dying day. If upon death you desire nothing more, not even the knowledge, experience, and tools of freedom that led you to be free from desire, you can then make what could accurately be described as a graceful exit. There is no other way. Awareness does not rely on materials and form for its own ever-presence, and is sustainable and independent without it. This is why even if you could nuke this planet and somehow extinguish all life forms into extinction, it would not stop a thing. If desire is still in play, even a complete apocalypse will not stop material existence. Awareness will simply reinsert itself in some other location or contextualized paradigm. This is no problem at all for awareness. As easy as a driven, obsessed painter burning one of his own paintings and then starting another one. They say that life finds a way, but this really isn't an apt description. It's more like desire finds a way. And never mind asking what lies beyond the paradigm. Go there and find out for yourself. This is like asking what lies beyond the universe. There's no way to answer this other than answering it yourself. Explorers explore, and their exploration does not hinge on promises or previews of what they might discover. If one already knows beforehand, it's not really exploration and discovery, is it? And it's worth noting that Buddhism, the perennial philosophy, the science of awareness, is not antiquated, incongruent, or out of sync with modern man and contemporary times. In this philosophy there is ample place for science, logic, atheism, and even antinatalism. There is room for nihilism, metaphysics, and existentialism. But none of these elements are used to define the philosophy, but rather serve as jigsaw pieces that when joined together formulate the body of philosophy. But the main jigsaw piece that is missing for modern man, one that keeps him continually lost in a maze of polar distinctions, never-ending arguments, and paradoxical confusion, is the role of awareness. That which man dismisses, overlooks, and minimizes by default, not realizing that this oversight is the main contributor to all hassles, struggles, woes, and suffering. Overlooking that which is doing the looking. Becoming so wrapped up in a dream that you forget it's a dream. Utilizing detachment to rid ourselves of desire is a long, arduous battle. Detachment practiced alone without ever experiencing enlightenment is mostly doomed for failure. Without the illuminating experience that ties everything together, detachment by itself becomes austerity and self-denial, and this completely misses the mark. The point is not in punishing ourselves. This is why meditation is key. Prior to an awakening, detachment is very difficult. We are deeply embedded in our programming and conditioning, and are hard-pressed to ease our grips on all the thoughts and beliefs that make us feel so comfortable and familiar. This is especially true for the West, but really extends to all of humanity. The present human condition is one of extreme spiritual sickness. This is why, for the average human being, spiritual philosophy will never even be a consideration. There is just too much working against it, and it becomes compounded by constant reinforcement. And spiritual philosophy is not something that tries to breach fortifications. Man must breach his own fortifications. Wisdom will not come to you, nor meet you halfway. You must cross the bridge to wisdom. But how is this possible when literally everything is set upon us to prevent this? This is why I have recommended such things as the use of psychoactive substances, sensory deprivation, and lucid dreaming. Your average man will require an extreme jolt to shake up his world, to loosen up the cement he is encased in. It can happen in other ways, such as near-death experiences, high fevers, or an extreme lack of sleep. But how often do these events occur? A world-stopping experience is very conducive to opening up men to the world of spirituality. And the most effective avenue towards enabling this is the use of psychoactive substances. A lot of spiritualists frown on this recommendation, dismissing it as unnecessary, but you have to wonder, what world are they living in? Is it also any wonder why true spiritual philosophy is embraced by so few? And the fact that Buddhism and Hinduism are prominent doesn't mean a thing, for the majority of Buddhists and Hindus are religious absorbers and regurgitators of Eastern dogma. They don't want you to free your mind because they don't want you to explore experience. And experience is the only way. This is why it is arrogant and disrespectful to minimize the role of psychoactives, especially since it's highly likely that psychoactives were the original teachers before the advent of wisdom and philosophy, and served as the primary lead-in to all wisdom and philosophy. I would even take it a step further and suggest that psychoactives enabled the transition of consciousness from instinct to self-awareness. But that's a topic for another day. The point is, mankind won't try to break out of his shell unless something turns his world upside down. So anything man can do to step outside of himself will assist in detachment. And detachment will better assist man in letting go of himself in meditation. If man can meditate and experience enlightenment, it will be smooth sailing thereafter. Post-enlightenment detachment is so much easier than detachment prior to enlightenment, because the enlightening experience contextualizes the wisdom with a resounding resonance. Everything falls into place. Beyond enlightenment, the only task that remains are helping others and preparing oneself for the date with death, where we surrender everything, desire nothing more, and make a final exit. That's it in a nutshell. Truly, there is nothing more that I can say. Namaste.